Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regular council meeting of the Fernie City Council for February 28th, 2023, on a snowy Tuesday evening. We acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded traditional territory of Yakut-Akmukliyat, and we recognize that we live and work in their vast lands. The Kanahunik are from Yakut-Akmukliyat and are members of the Tanaha-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. I'll call this meeting to order. This meeting is being conducted by electronic means in accordance with Council Procedure Bylaw number 2446. And I will ask for a mover and seconder for the following recommendation: that if the communication link to the specified place of this meeting is interrupted and cannot be restored within 15 minutes, the meeting shall adjourn and convene to the soonest possible time the quorum can be achieved and public notice requirements met. And the mover, Councillor Audie Kelly, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. All in favor? Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. I'll now ask for approval of the agenda and any late items. Seeing none, can I ask for a mover? Councillor Audie Kelly. Councillor Hamilton seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? And for those watching online, Councillor Shoesmith is present. He's having difficulty with his time.
Review the team.
Item number 4, I'll ask for adoption of the minutes of previous council meetings, that the minutes of the regular council meetings held on January 24th, 2023 and February 14th, 2023 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Hampton, seconded by Councillor Ramadas. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? I'd now like to open the floor to public participation and invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, excluding matters for which speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit. And a speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes. And I will ask at the specified place if we have anybody willing to attend or anybody or present or anybody online who would like to present.
Your worship, we have no one here at the specified place, but we do have participants online waiting to speak.
Okay, can you promote our first speaker, please?
Yes, I'll do that now.
Thank you.
This microphone's muted.
Your microphone is muted.
Hello, can you hear me, Mayor and Council?
We can. Can you please identify yourself?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Chris Inglis. I'm here attending tonight on behalf of my mother, who is at 1151 First Avenue in Fernie. Some of my concerns I have, Mayor and Council. I've been fighting the snow removal policy for 2 or 3 years now, and it hasn't gotten better. It's gotten worse, and this is part of the budget plans for this year. I've even sent in direct requests for services and asked for a reply from I forget the fellow's name, I'm sorry, It wasn't the director. It was the guy in charge of the streets, and I still, after 4 requests, still no reply. So that's very frustrating for me on my end. The city said they would get better at communication in this new council. I haven't seen that yet. If not, I think it might have been gotten worse. I still don't understand why the comments on Facebook haven't been turned on. This isn't something that needs to be brought forward to a council meeting. It was turned off without being brought forward to a council meeting. And also too, the budget for this coming year. I've heard rumors in between 6.5% and 7%. Council really needs to look at these numbers harder, because you're chasing the local people out of Fernie because they can no longer afford it. And some of the cuts I see, we don't need a $1.7 million fire department in a town of 5,500 people and 3 people at the top of the fire department ladder. That $1.7 million budget is way out of line. And you need to look at staffing members, how much their salary is, and how many actual staff you have on at the city of Fernie instead of unionized workers. We don't have enough workers, but we got plenty of staff being hired. Those are my comments. Please take them into consideration. I thank you for your time, Mayor and Council.
Thank you for your perspective, Mr. Inglis.
Thank you. I look forward to hopefully have
Not seeing any of the hands up or for persons wishing to speak for worship.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. If that is the case, we will move along, and takes us along to item number 8, bylaws. A report from our manager of planning, Mr. Simulini.
Thank you, Your Worship. Apologies, just bringing forward my screen to share. Lisa Cusick, Council. Tonight I am presenting to you on a rezoning application for 1221 8th Avenue. It's bylaw 2482, and it's to rezone the property from R2 duplex residential to R1B single detached plus residential. This would facilitate construction of a detached garage with a secondary dwelling unit above. These rezonings are quite common in the annex. The difference between this rezoning and others that we see is this is an R2 to R1B rather than R1 to R1B. So R1 being single family, R2 being duplex residential. However, on this lot, there already is a single family dwelling unit constructed. So that actually is a permitted use in the R2 zone. But in this case, they are just looking to take what exists already and add a single detached plus residential. So to summarize that, the development of a duplex, given that there is a single family home on that lot already, is at this point to the homeowner of the question. The application is consistent with our OCP and our affordable housing strategy. It is contributing potentially to housing affordability, housing diversity, and again, with the hope of a long-term rental, applying a strategy to be successful. So again, brief presentation, but tonight we are recommending to council that they move forward with approval of the application and first and second reading of the file. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simulini. Any questions from council? Seeing none. Okay.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Can I ask Mr. McConnell to read the recommendation?
Sure. The council approved the application to amend zoning bylaw number 1750 by rezoning 1221 8th Avenue from R2 duplex residential to R1B single detached plus residential.
Moved by Councilman Bazik, seconded by Councilor Kelly. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed?
And you need a second recommendation.
Second recommendation, please.
is. No, we put a trim on that. That council give first and second reading of zoning bylaw number 1750, amendment bylaw number 2482, 2022.
Moved by Councilor Hamilton, seconded by Councilor Nixon. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimously carried. Thank you. Brings us to item 9, business, and item 9.1, again, report from manager of planning, Mr. Sidney.
Thank you, Worship. Very briefly, to me, just an introduction to our planning consultant, Fernie, who are coming into the room right now. A couple of years ago, City of Fernie was awarded a grant from UBCM, approximately $170,000 to take a look at our development approvals process. Matt is here this week doing some work. As council is aware, they were most council had a chance to participate in a session yesterday. Tonight, Matt is here to chat about the project and bring it into the public view and moving forward with it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brad Michael with McElhaney, and I believe that we have a screen share as well. So here to bring that Brad, Martin, I'll pass it on. Thank you. Yeah. You good?
And not in my career. Not in my career.
So, welcome. Please go ahead and if you can speak clearly with the public is picking it up from our mic.
Will do. Awesome. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Pleasure to be here. I want to introduce myself. My name is Brian Wall. To my left is Mark Bartett, the planner with our firm, and our technical guru and right hand planning expert. Ruben is working our technology here today. I just wanted to give you folks an update this evening on the project that Derek mentioned, the development approvals project that we're working on. Just a couple of items I'd like to outline on our agenda tonight. Turn open the screen here, okay? Let's see. Okay, we'll go with it.
Well, that's not on your screen. There it is. I'm not back here, so I'm not sure if it is back there.
I'm showing, I see meeting post on the screen, but it doesn't.
I'm not being used to.
Oh, you're not.
No, but it's, I apologize for talking over them. I'm not connected, so I don't know, is everybody else connected?
I think so.
I still so the Ruben's presentation.
It says that you started screen sharing, but the screen is black.
It's sharing in the room, Ruben, but it's not sharing on the. There it is. Here we are.
You're not reconnected, Councilor Arnold? Note to self, I'll on the TV.
Don't people do.
No,
I think it was something happened.
but it's just fine.
Are we still in recess?
Your worship, I'm not on site and I'm seeing the presentation come through live.
Thank you, Ms. Jansen. So can we resume? We shall resume then.
I'm getting good now from the meeting host, so.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. It's, sorry, Brad.
No worries.
Great.
Excellent. Well, I just, as we got on the screen, I just want to outline a few of our items we'd like to go through this morning or this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about the objectives of the project, a little bit about our team, some of the key components of the project, what our major deliverables are going to be, some information about phases and schedule, stakeholders that we plan on dealing with, and engagement events. So in terms of the objectives of the approvals enhancements project, there's really three objectives. The first objective is to deal with systems, and that's achieve operational efficiencies in the development approvals process. Another objective is to deal with process, and that's enhancing customer service in that development approval process. And the third would be technology, and we're going to explore the use of automation, how we might be able to use some of that technology again to help improve that development process in Fernie. In terms of the project team, very quickly, there's really two parts to the team. There's the Fernie portion, and then there's the McElhaney portion. Derek, of course, is looking after the Fernie portion, and he's got his planning team that's working very collaboratively with us on the project. On our end, I'm the lead of the project. Ruben is doing a lot of the heavy lifting with Mark, and on our side, we have our Fernie office is our local expert content. We've got our planning engagement team. We've got a graphics team that was working with your great staff and graphics and to come up with some of the graphics for our project. And then we have a supporting team of engineers and biologists and all sorts of other experts that if we needed to get some additional information or help on certain aspects, they could jump in and help us out on that. So that's just a little bit about the project team. In terms of the project itself, there's really six key components. First component would be the policy review. And we've done that policy review already. Another components would be a best practices research. Another component would be stakeholder engagement and First Nation consultation. Another one of our key components is going to be redefining the process. We're going to understand how the process is working right now, and we're going to work towards redefining that process. Another one of our components is going to be providing a handbook for preparing development applications. And that handbook is going to be good for both the development community as well as for internal staff. So we're going to very clearly help define what the process could be, how we could improve that, and provide that handbook that's going to be a very, very useful tool for both those in the communities, developers, builders, mom and pops, as well as city staff. And then the last part of the project is going to be looking at a needs assessment for automation. And we're going to look and see what types of programs are available, what kind of automation can the city of Fernie use to help enhance the development improvements process. Out of those six key components, there's going to be four major deliverables. And those deliverables are, first of all, going to be to redefine the process, the development process. Another deliverable will be to provide that handbook. Third deliverable will be that needs assessment. And then the fourth deliverable will be to look at the development approvals process and policies. In terms of project phasing and schedules, we're finished phase one. That was our project initiation. We kind of got things off to a good start. Right now we're sitting at phase two, and that's our development approvals process and policies review. We've done a lot of that review, and we're here this week to engage with the community to gather information. So that's the part that we're at right now. We've had some awesome engagement in the last couple of days, and I'm just going to talk about that in just a minute. But we've got a lot of great information that we're gonna take back to phase 3, and that's going to be the process mapping and development applications handbook. Get that completed, and then phase 4 will be the needs assessment. So we've got a little bit of work in front of us, but I can report now that we've got some great data moving forward. So I need to, big shout out to those that have been involved so far, and looking forward to some continued great engagement. In terms of the engagement itself, on this screen, we've got 2 images there. The image on the right is a little bit about the community engagement tools that we're using. Let's Talk Fernie online engagement hub is up and running. Opportunity there for the public to be engaged. In-person workshop. We had a great workshop yesterday. We've got another one coming up tomorrow. One-on-one interviews. We did have a series of interviews today. We've got a few more to go. Online surveys and questionnaires. The city's got a social media platform that's being used. We've got presentations we're making, and we've got some virtual meetings coming up as well. So that's kind of our communication end of things. On the left-hand side, we've indicated in the scope of consultation, you have collaboration, which is working closely together to get things done. And on the bottom of the scale, you've got, it's more for your information. And so we've indicated that our city, the city staff and city council, it's a collaborative process, working down from there, down to the local residents. Not to say that we want to exclude any kind of collaboration with the locals, but we're going to get things done, and then we're going to help inform them. So that's kind of the scale of the consultation that we plan on using. Just a little bit about what we've done to date or this week on our engagement. I'm looking off a sheet that's old, so I'm looking off of that screen now because my sheet's out of date. Yesterday afternoon, we had a workshop with the development community. It was very well attended. I've been involved in many workshops through my career, and I mentioned at that session, and I mentioned to the staff as well, that I think that was probably one of the more engaging groups that I've been involved with. They were just very free and liberal with their responses, and very respectful of the fact that staff was there, but yet very honest about their comments. It was just a really good, healthy exchange of really great information. So that was yesterday afternoon. Today we were here meeting with a lot of the senior staff, and those were equally good. It was mostly senior staff. There was some planning folks that were not of the senior staff, but again, great information, and completely for the sole purpose of trying to identify where we might be able to assist Fernie in streamlining the development process. We have our council presentation this evening. Tomorrow morning, we have a workshop with the city's internal staff. So it'll be somewhat similar to the workshop that we had with the developers, which I think most of you folks either attended in person or online. It'll be a similar format, but structured more for the staff. And then on Wednesday, we've got some meetings with the local housing authorities and or the societies, and that is going to be now zooming in on some of the micro issues on affordable housing and what are some of the constraints that they're facing. How can we build that into the process as well? So that's a little bit about what we've done in the last couple of days. And this last one is just a little bit, we just thought we'd give a little bit of information on how yesterday's went. During the process, we use a kind of an interactive process. And through the afternoon, we had 993 responses, which was great, based on the number of people that were there and so forth. So that was great. And today's workshops again, or today's interviews again, we have about 10 interviews with senior staff. So far it's great. And again, I can just relay that the information we're gathering is great. Cooperation from your staff is exceptional. And we're looking forward to finishing up our time in Fernie here on the public consultation, and I think we're going to get some great information. And with that, I'd like to just make an offer to council if there's any questions. Ruben and Mark and myself would be most pleased to try to answer any questions that council asks.
Thank you. Thanks, Brad. Any questions? So I have a couple. My first one is an observation that I would agree, Brad. I thought yesterday's workshop with the building and development community was excellent. I thought, I have to applaud everyone on their openness and candor and professionalism throughout. And I thought it was a great first step in terms of an interactive process. And so congratulate you gentlemen and Mr. Simoni for putting that together. I thought it worked very well. So thank you for that. I did want to ask about putting together a handbook. And in this day and age, my worry is that a handbook gets stale pretty quickly. And it's potentially not a good reference tool. And I wondered if we are also considering options for continuous improvement. So whether it's a handbook or it's an online tool, that people can refer to, it can be, there's obviously these things, absolute document control, so we don't have multiple versions floating around, but that our development community, our builders, our staff, citizens can refer to it, and it's always the most updated version available.
Very good question, and I think the vernacular of the handbook may be a bit misguided. Yes, there will likely be a hard copy, but it's certainly going to be in a digital format. So I suspect that a lot of those folks at the meeting yesterday, the developers and builders, they seem to be quite a sophisticated group. They're going to go online. It's going to be online. Same with the mom and pops. If they want to go online, to get that information, it will be online. Will it be in a hard copy as a handbook? Probably will. But as processes change, amend, morph a little bit, adjust, refine, the staff will just go into the digital document, make those adjustments, get rid of any existing hard copies that are lying around, and now we're dealing with the reality. Derek, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, Brad. Thank you. And you're working through the council. I think one of the points that came up yesterday in the meeting was the opportunity to do a periodic review and involve that building community, involve the people that are using that handbook to ensure that, what we're doing today and what we end up reporting, what we end up bringing forward as a process is working for everybody. So I think there's going to be a continuing a dialogue with the development community, whether it be the mom and pop or the bigger developers in town. So really looking forward to that moving forward past this project end date.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. And it may be as simple as when we produce a handbook, it has a reference right on the front cover. Visit the website for the latest up-to-date material. Councilor Ramos.
May I add, your worship, it could be a chatbot too.
Chatbot. Everybody becomes suspicious.
Well, just,
Yeah.
my point is, there could be a technology, so not just
Of course, yeah. My concern is a handbook. It could get stale very quickly, and we want to make sure people have the access to the most recent material.
It's a really good point, and I can assure you that my good peer Ruben, it's right up to speed on technology. If there's anything out there that's going to be, higher tech, easier to use, Ruben will be all over that. So, the term handbook probably dates me. But yeah, it's going to be an informational piece that both staff and the public are gonna have.
Perfect, yeah, and I don't wanna sound, make too big a deal of it. I think a handbook is helpful, but just so that people always know what it may not be the most updated material that they have in their hands. Ruben.
Thank you, your worship, through your worship, the council we'll also make sure we provide the editable document in an editable format to the city so that staff can update the documents.
Thank you. Yeah. Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, your worship. Just a question. We had one concern from the community yesterday at the engagement. Is the email. They want to know when they're going to get emails, right? And so do you guys you captured all their emails yesterday? And when is the timeline for that? Starting to send that development group some emails and just letting them know.
Like an update for them on the process?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
Yeah, I can comment on that, your worship, Councilor Nixon. I think that when we sent out the invites for the session yesterday, we sort of tried to encompass everybody, and I know we probably missed some people, and I apologize for that, but we did the best we could. But with that being said, now we're moving forward to getting a whole list of contact information to have sort of a mail out list, if you will, to mail out updates on the project. And as we keep moving on with the project, we're going to be keeping our desktop page up to date. And so all of that information will be there. So as there's major sort of deliverables or milestones being reached, we can continue to keep the development community in.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate the update.
Great. Thank you very much.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks.
I'd ask, did anybody not check their plug on their computer when that?
I did.
That's because you were watching it on your screen.
I saw it pop up, but I did just like want to get that.
The second and third time I did.
I saw it on the main screen.
Thank you. So that brings us to item 9.2, a report from our Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Hello, council. This is scheduled to be the final budget presentation for this year's budget cycle. Next step is March 14th, which will be the first two meetings of our financial plan bylaw. It will be a somewhat shorter presentation for me this evening. I'm going to begin by talking about the open house that we had on the 15th and our online budget survey results. A couple of follow-up items that arose from the February 7th budget meeting. High-level recap of the Feb 6th and 7th meetings. Ending at the projected shortfall for 2023 as proposed. At which point I will turn it over to council for discussion and direction. Q&A and direction for staff to take forward. Here is our schedule for this process. Again, after tonight's direction from council, staff will prepare we'll prepare the bylaw for first and second readings at the March 14th regular meeting of council. And on to the open house and survey results. As you know, staff and council hosted a budget open house across the street on February 15th, which was attended by my count, approximately 17 members of the public. In addition to our paper copies of the budget survey, we did have sheets of paper and collection bins scattered around the senior center. A few people did leave some comments on those sheets of paper. One person wanted a detailed capital project list and funding source, which I provided to them, and also directed them to the February 7th capital budget meeting agenda where this was published and presented to council. Another person was asking for more detail on the wastewater projects, as the slides that we had printed at the open house had that in summary form. So provided that detail to them and also directed them to where they could find it on the website. And lastly, on those sheets, there were also concerns about electric vehicles and the potential downsides of purchasing those, which you can see on your screen there. Those concerns have been passed along, and we informed the citizen in question that they will be addressed as part of our fleet policy that's currently being worked on. And that was it for written responses at the open house. As for the online survey, we received 32 responses in the 9 days that the survey was open. Just as a comparative, the 2022 budget survey generated 102 responses in 8 days. I did include the 2020 citizen satisfaction survey, just because there's a few questions on that survey that were comparable to our last 2 years budget survey. But in general, that specific survey was not meant to be a budget survey. So these three questions were on all three of those aforementioned surveys. And responses have generally remained consistent over the past 3 years. Over 70% of respondents are between the ages of 35 and 65. Over 75% of respondents said that they're happy with their quality of life and optimistic about the future of Fernie. 16% of respondents felt neutral about their quality of life and the future of Fernie, and 6.5% were somewhat not happy and somewhat not optimistic about Fernie's future. This slide is my attempt to go through the written responses that we received on this year's survey and pick out some common themes that respondents wanted to bring to our attention. Starting with what people like most, and I don't think any of those should come as a surprise, but most people said community, lifestyle, and outdoor recreation, and also the small town atmosphere that Fernie provides, which personally are the major reasons that I live here as well. Most important issues facing the community includes affordability and affordable housing, flood protection and future proofing our community, and then focusing on our critical infrastructure and replacing our aging facilities. Respondents were asked to provide their comments on budget and the proposed tax increase. One of the main comments that I saw 6 or 7 respondents made is that 6.8% is too high, especially given that the average increase in assessed value in Fernie was 19%. So I understood that to mean that we were kind of double dipping on an increase here, which is not how property tax works. I do have another slide on this later, but if council approves a 6.8% increase, we can only collect 6.8% more. So in order for us to do that, the mill rate, which is the rate per $1,000 of assessed value, actually decreases so that we can only collect 6.8% more. And I do have a slide on that later. So we don't collect any extra on top of the 6.8%, resulting in that 19% assessment increase. We only collect the extra 6.8%. And then lastly, some other comments. Obviously, people are concerned about inflation and everything else is expensive. And unfortunately, the city is not immune from these inflationary pressures. And in addition to these concerns, there were a few comments that did understand the need for an increase, despite the fact that everything is expensive. And finally, there were a fair amount of other comments around fiscal responsibility, managing our funds appropriately, and good decision-making when it comes to replacing our aging facilities and infrastructure. And so these 3 previous slides are only meant to be a bit of a recap on the survey results that were provided to council yesterday. The complete results will also be published for the community as a whole to read, should they choose to do so. But that's the summary so far on the survey.
There's one thing I just wanted to mention in that with the results that low, those with the response rate being that low, those results are specifically attributable to the participants of the survey. But we can't say with any certainty that they represent any general perspectives across any specific group of the population. We know that with that low response rate, it really is a pulse check just on the individuals who participated in the survey. But it is an indication among that group that there are some common themes, and it was an indication to Bryn and I that we needed to communicate a little bit more again about how assessments are related to taxation and the mill rate. So Mr. Berger will do that later in his presentation. There was a lot of promotion of the open house, and the surveys done both in print with some posters around the community and online on our website and on Facebook. Just like to touch on, we've had just a little under 200 individuals visit the budget project on Let's Talk Fernie. And 32 of those, approximately 200 visitors completed the survey. On Facebook, our post reach has been, from the start of the new year, our page reach has been to approximately 32,000 people throughout the region and beyond, but not a significant number of those attributed to the budget posts. Significantly, most of our popular content is related to Recreation being the red flag, the outdoor rink, the winter trail system and grooming updates, or the moose in the park. Which seem to receive a lot stronger organic reach on Facebook than our budget content has this year.
Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. Just on the topic of communication with the community and getting the word out, have we made any progress on building an email list? Or looked into that at all as a mechanism of communicating?
We have not taken any tangible steps on an email list or distribution yet. We need to complete a little more, privacy impact assessment once we identify what tool we're going to use, and then do a bit of a more of a significant review of how that works and develop a governance policy around it. So there's more administrative work in the background because we're a public local government to do, then we can start to look at that. We do have contact information for local businesses if they have valid business license, and we do have a slowly but growing number of members of the Let's Talk Fernie tool. So merging those and starting to do call outs will be possible in the future, but we just haven't gotten there yet.
Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just wondering, like, what exactly happened in 2022 year that we had 102 responses versus 32? You should know the answer, but I can't remember what exactly was the reason for higher turnout last year.
It's hard to say for sure, but I think there was,
This would have been 2 years ago because we are now doing the 2023 budget.
Oh, yeah, right.
yeah, I think one issue that a lot of people wanted to comment on was the affordable housing reserve that was created as part of the budget process. And also, there was a lot of news around our budget cycle, I would say, that maybe people have been paying attention to for the 2 years prior. I don't know if you can think of anything else that might.
Was Let's Talk part of the communication mode back in 2021?
We used it in a very similar way, launched the budget consultation project, appended a survey to it so that it was available, and then allowed people to either create an account or not create an account to participate. But it was a new platform, so I would assume the people who were initially interested to see what that new platform looked like jumped on and engaged right away.
Any other questions?
It was just a comment, I was just, although it looks disappointing with 32 respondents, maybe it's an endorsement of what we're doing is correct. So, thanks for the comment.
Thanks, Your Worship. Again, I second what Councillor Nixon is saying. There may be smaller number of sample space, but there's still signal, not noise. So we should look at the trends there too.
Very true.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Burdick.
Okay, thank you. So now on to, I have two follow-up items. There was, the first was an update on the BC housing step code. The housing minister signed the latest changes almost 3 weeks ago, which are to be effective May 1st. Step 3 is now the default for part-9 buildings, which means Fernie automatically is moving from step 2 to step 3. And this slide is obviously meant to be a very brief summary. There's a lot more detail than what appears on this slide. And given that this is not really specific to budget, I think the takeaway from this is that our planning department are still busy working through the announced changes and are working on bringing a more detailed update to council in the future. Thank you. There was a lot of discussion around the wood chipper on the February 7th meeting, and staff brought forward this just bit of a discounted cash flow analysis on the purchase of this unit. For this calculation, we assumed a 6% inflationary rate and also a 6% discount rate. Annual cost savings of $23,500, which includes gas for the drive to Sparwood, staff time to drive to Sparwood, and the dumping fees there of approximately $2,000 a trip. For our fire smart work, we currently rent wood chipper from an external contractor. So instead of paying them, that revenue would come to the city for approximately 7 times per year. And then subtract $8,000 for annual maintenance, which is staff time and materials, and an annual contribution to reserve brings us to that total annual savings of just $15,500. Initial capital cost of the wood chipper is $50,000, so I assumed a useful life of 15 years and the 6% rates mentioned earlier. This comes with the payback period of 2.9 years. The unit is net positive net present value of 3.3 years, and the NPV over the 15 years of the wood chipper is around $184,000.
How many can we buy?
It's an escrow. So much time.
Some diminishing.
We have a lot of trees.
And this type of analysis, I'd like to, see come to council with every purchase going forward, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that detail, actually, that's very helpful.
The challenge is finding actual cost savings, because even, staff time can be spent elsewhere, but it's not, it's not like most people aren't working that time here, so. But that's a good start, I think. And now on to a recap of the operating budget, which was presented to council on Feb 6th. I just have 5 slides summarizing that presentation, so it might feel quick, but if at any time you want to stop me for some questions, please do. I've got this one slide on revenue here. Revenue is expected to increase this year for a few reasons. New construction is again high in town at an extra $167,000. Building and development permits, we budgeted to increase by 43,500 because there's still no signs of that slowing down. The EBPTSA, which is the property tax sharing agreement with the mines, is budgeted to increase by 189,000, which is a 6% increase. Pool and arena revenue is expected to increase back to pre-pandemic levels, and also our investment revenue is budgeted to have a fairly sizable increase due to increased interest rates and more diligent tax management practices. And on to expenses, our legislative department had a decrease of $36,000 because there's no election this year, slightly offset by some conferences returning to in-person, such as the LGLA seminar. And then there's some strategic planning session planned for council early this year. The administration department has decreased this year due to less budgeted external projects, as well as a greater allocation to other departments to better reflect time spent there. Planning, building, inspection, and bylaw, mostly increases are related due to contractual increases. But this year with our manager of engineering now being an approving officer, I did create a bit of an allocation from engineering to planning to more accurately reflect those costs. Protective services, which is our fire department and our CMP. There's obviously a notable increase in our CMP because we're now told that they're at full complement in Fernie. This results not so much an increase in taxation as it is a reduction to our financial stability operating reserve. We used to put that difference into that reserve. Fire department expenses are budgeted to be 1.75 million. A decrease there from 2022 because in 2022 we had some retro pay there resulting from contract negotiations. And that was ultimately funded by our financial stability operating reserve.
Thank you, Worship. I noticed that it's also a very slight reduction from 2021, which doesn't have the retroactive pay. So what has happened in that regard? Is it, has there been some efficiencies found in overtime or something like that that has allowed us to drop the expected cost of the fire department?
The main reason for that, thank you, Councillor Isaac, is that they're not in that building anymore. So they've saved quite a bit on insurance and utilities and temporary for this year, but.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Let's chat about.
Hey, Worship,
Oh, sorry, yeah, please, Councilor.
if you can go back to the revenues, like where to put it, yes, that one. definitely, the investment revenue that you spoke about with cash management and higher interest rates. Kudos to the staff there. Maybe I've asked this question via email before, but I just wanted to understand a little bit better. Are there any other opportunities within MFA to get better returns on some of those cash flows?
No, so just to provide some more context, I did provide to council the 5 or 6 products that MFA offers, and that's all that they offer.
Right.
So if we were to explore other options, it would have to be at a bank or a credit union. And I do intend to do more research around that when the investment policy comes before council. But for now, the majority of our long-term savings is with the MFA, which doesn't mean it can't change, but
Right.
Yeah.
I've got another question.
Yeah, please.
With the EVPTSA, when is that expiring? The 2031?
I will bring that up in a moment and confirm that for you. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'll be fine.
that's roughly correct.
Yeah, all right. Thanks.
Good converted, Karen.
Okay, thank you. Parks and Recreation, there's an increase here due to service offerings at the pool and arena returning to pre-pandemic levels. But we've also shifted where a couple of positions are classified between Parks and Rec and facility maintenance. So you can see a jump down lower there in the facility maintenance expenses, which is because we have some journeymen that were originally classed in Parks and Rec that we moved to facility maintenance. So that's why one is lower and one is higher, because those 2 journeymen spend most of their time maintaining our buildings. Revenue in Parks and Rec is set to increase, again, due to service levels back to pre-pandemic levels. And facility revenue is a slight decrease, as we do have a new rental lease for the courthouse kitty corner to us. We used to provide janitorial service there, and we no longer do, which is why we are getting less revenue for that contract. But also not providing janitorial services over
Mr. Boranowski.
Your worship, the Elk Valley Property Tax Sharing Agreement, Council or Ron asked this question. The term of the agreement was from the 1st of January 2008 to the 31st of December 2032.
Thank you.
Engineering and Public Works, this department has no large changes this year. Most increases that you see here are due to contractual obligations. And that was it for the February 6th recap. These next slides are from our capital presentation, which was on February 7th. This slide summarizes our capital projects by department. This slide was also present at open house, and I mentioned this earlier. I did have some comments from attendees there that it was too summarized for them, and so just for anyone watching, all of these numbers were presented in more detail at the February 7th budget meeting with council, and the detailed numbers of all of these are published as part of that February 7th agenda package, and also as part of tonight's agenda package. Should anyone in the public watching this meeting like to find that additional detail. And this slide, while hard to read, is the funding sources for all the projects on the previous slide. And I mentioned this on the 7th, but 44% of our projects are to be funded from reserves this year. I believe this is on page 22 of the wonder.
Yeah.
And next slide is our budgeted ending reserve balances for the next 5 years, beginning with 2023. And also another very busy slide. It's on page 23 of your binders. Again, you'll notice in later years, some of our reserves are negative, such as mobile equipment reserve, come time to purchase our fire ladder truck, and also the sewer reserve. And as we complete more work on our asset management and long-term financial plan, those balances will be amended in future budget cycles to include funding options other than reserves.
Councilor Hammond.
Thank you. In the agenda package, tonight under Schedule A, there was mention of of more work to be done to determine what the shortfall of our reserves is. I'm wondering if, kind of, off the top of your head, you have a ballpark of what that looks like right now.
Just for clarity, are you referring to the infrastructure deficit or shortfall in reserves as it relates to that? Or-
Yes.
Okay. So Director Jensen may have more to say on this, but this all ties into what we're doing with our asset management plans and building our 20-year capital plan and our 20-year reserves plan, which we have some good data from 2017, the AMEC plan. Now we're working on updating it and building that out longer term.
I guess if I may prod a little bit further, as we're discussing budget and looking at tax rates to fund our reserves and to make up funding those reserves or to start putting aside money for those reserves. I'm just curious if there's any more information available at this point that might help guide us in that discussion.
Thank you, Councilor Hamilton. So the recommended levels of contribution to reserves are still based on that 2017 report. As it's updated, I expect those recommended levels to change, but hopefully, but not by much. From what I understand, that report was pretty detailed 6 years ago. And so the numbers that we're using now should be fairly close, but also note that we've reduced them since 2021 because of the short-term loan payment for the office facility. Yeah.
Councilor McIsaac.
Thank you, Richard. One question that I had with regards to the reserves and projects that with 44% of the projects drawing on reserves. I presume that with the nature of reserves, that there's always going to be some projects that are going on reserves. That's what we have created reserves for. But I'm wondering if we could get an indication of what is sort of expected to normally be. What percentage of projects would be ideally funded from reserves? Is it 10% and 90% will be covered through regular taxation and monies earned? Is it half? And we would expect these are long-term projects, half of which are being funded from reserves and half of which are being funded from ongoing taxation. Like, is there a number that we're shooting for? Is there a number we should be afraid of? Is 44% alarming? Because I don't know if I have a really good sense of that yet. It feels alarming, but I don't know if I should be alarmed by 44% in reserves. So I wonder if I could get a bit of an explanation about what's the norm and what's expected.
Thank you, Councilor Isaac. I'm gonna start answering this, and maybe Mr. Bornowski might have more to add, but and that's a great question, and it's something that I personally have struggled with since starting here. And so I don't have a definite number answer for you, but what I will say is that our infrastructure deficit, as it was last measured 6 years ago, is way higher than our reserve balance. So there's no realistic way to ever pay that off with our reserves. So we're going to have to get grants and get our projects to grant ready levels and be on top of these opportunities to fund these deficit projects.
Yeah.
But as for a percentage of what's healthy and what's not, it's really difficult to give you that right now. But I would say, 44% is. I mean, it's better than it was last year, I guess.
Do you mind to follow up? Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate that, your candor in that response. And I think my takeaway from that, and hopefully you can nod or shake your head at this one, and that is we shouldn't really pay as much attention to the 44% reserves. What we're looking at is what is the diverging line between the infrastructure deficit and the level of reserves. That's what we care about, right? Is the ongoing. Those two lines are continuing to diverge. We are not moving the reserve line close to where it's going to eventually meet up with the infrastructure cost line. It's going the opposite direction. That's the real concern. It's not the percentage. Am I accurate in that summation?
In my opinion, yes, and I don't think it's Fernie that's struggling with this problem. I think it's every municipality in North America,
Oh,
which I know that you know, but,
Mr. Burns.
Thank you, if I may. In terms of the longer term capital planning that we have to undertake, that will list our projects out beyond the next 4 or 5 years, or 2 and 3 years. As we engage in longer term capital planning, many of those projects will be unfunded future capital projects. And then we need to apply based on council's values and our asset management policy and our asset management strategy. We'll have to then apply what funding models are going to then make those projects happen. And they may be borrowing. We may plan not to have reserves and to borrow. We may plan to rely on a grant and hope that a grant opportunity becomes available in 2028 to build an X, and we'll have a shovel-ready project at that time. Because it simply isn't realistic to have cash reserves to pay everything as you go. Although that has been and is quite a standard guiding philosophy, especially among more conservative municipalities. Not politically conservative, fiscally conservative municipalities. They adopt a pay-as-you-go philosophy where they see the reserves like a sawtooth. Where you know you have a project coming up in 5 years, and so you use taxation to build up that reserve to pay as much as you can without having to incur short-term or long-term debt. Certainly that's been our general approach, although we have, since the AMIP, Lisa's work and then Mr. Burdick's work on finance and the teams come to the realization that, yeah, there's a gap and a growing gap in between what we have to repair, what it will cost to repair, and the money we have in pocket. And so then we need to take your philosophies around risk tolerance and our asset management strategy and say, okay, are we willing to tolerate a risk of going to referendum to borrow to replace an X or a Y, or to get it shovel ready and pursue a grant for project Z? Those become funding strategies for your master unfunded capital list.
Thank you. I know there are a couple of questions at the table, but I wanted to ask Director Jansen. She has her hand up. I think I missed it when your hand up before. So, Director Jansen.
Thank you, Your Worship. CAO Born actually did speak to several of the topics. But yeah, we do need to, top of mind for Director Burdett and myself is presenting our long-term reserve balances and our revenues against our asset liabilities and start preparing a comparable year-over-year indicator on how we're closing that gap.
Thank you, Ms. Jansen. Councilor Robbins.
Just wanted to add to what Councilor McIsaac was saying, Your Worship, just, back of the envelope math, if you do it, it's like 2.5 years. You'll be out of your reserve funds at that 44% rate. Is it not? Yeah. So.
I was just going to.
It's just going to go back to our risk tolerance as a group, I guess.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add, I think Councilor McIsaac answered my question much more eloquently.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burris, carry on.
thank you. So then just to close on this slide, our budgeted ending reserve balances for 2023 is higher than the budget is higher than the 2022 budgeted ending reserve balances. So at least that's a small win in my opinion. Speaking of reserves, this is a 5-year comparative of our contribution to reserves. Note the large drop there in 2021, which was mostly because of that short-term loan to pay for the ops facility. And the main difference this year from last year is the stabilization reserve is not there because of the increase in police expenditures. And also I did not include a proposed transfer to the affordable housing reserve like we did last year.
Councilor McIsaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. You've mentioned this several times, Director Burr, about the reserve change for 2021, but I'm with regard to a specific item, but I'm kind of curious about what the impact of the 0% tax increase for that year, what the implications were of that. Because at the time that was passed and under the the COVID emergency that was happening at that time, it was well understood around the table, at least I believe it was, that there was gonna be a direct impact on things like reserves and so on with it passing to 0%. And so I'm just curious, are we seeing the footprints of that decision on what happened in reserves in 2021? Or is that a relatively small component of that change?
In terms of reserves, it's relatively small. Where I've noticed it this year is with our pool staffing. You'll see on the slide here right away that that's one of the reasons for a large increase in our expenses. And I think the reason for that was the timing of when I started and when Ms. Tynan came on to help. COVID started, pool shut down, so those expenses went way down. But so did our tax revenue from 0%, or didn't go down, it stayed level.
Right.
And so like, those shutdowns kind of saved us that year. But historically, those were always kind of under budgeted, I would say, even before COVID, and now we're seeing that this year kind of hit us with added expense. And I think if COVID didn't happen and we did the 0%, we would have been quicker to see that fall behind, so I think COVID, while horrible, was saved our expenses for a year or two from there. And now, because I remember, you'll remember Ms. Tynan used to say that we haven't been budgeting for things appropriately. And now we're starting to see that now that things are back to like full force.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. This slide is a summary of our major projects planned for this year, noting that the top one on that list is still grant dependent. So if we do not get that grant, we will not be doing that project. This slide is a reminder for both council and the community of our upcoming major projects in the next several years. We need to review and potentially renew our wastewater treatment strategy. Need a plan for the long-term viability of the Fernie Creek water source. Both of those have some smaller projects this year that are designed on getting the larger solution in a more shovel-ready state so that we can apply for grants to do the larger fixes in the next few years. And then there's the protective services facility. We'll be looking at a site selection and needs analysis this year. And then there's the last one there, which we call the CNL right away, which is the required realignment design and replacement of some water and sewer mains that are on an unstable slope, which is at risk of failure. And this slide you have seen a couple of times. This is our preliminary shortfall, alongside a summary of changes to major revenue and expenses, or changes to revenue and expenses expected for this year. I went over revenue earlier, and also as mentioned earlier, the increased recreation and pool wages is a fairly large number there. Couple of reasons for that. One is increasing service levels to pre-pandemic levels, and the other is now we're fully budgeting for those staff, which we historically have not done. This, and then there's 436,000 of new positions, which we went over on February 6th, but they are the Parks and Rec Manager, Public Works Manager, the Business Analyst, and the Deputy Fire Chief. And then there's 276,000 of contractual salary increases. Utilities and insurance also large increases this year. And there's a benefit increase line there because of the added salaries, but again, not as much as you might expect because of the money we've saved on our WCB rate especially. And then this slide on that shortfall, if it were to be funded completely by taxation, translates to 6.82% tax increase. And again, this increase is not on top of assessment value increases. The mill rate would actually decrease so that we do only collect 6.82%, which you can see in that little graphic I put there. The 2022 mill rate was $3.35 per $1,000 of assessed value, and that rate would go down to 2.991 per $1,000 to ensure that we only collect the extra 6.8%. And that's it for my recap. I would like to turn it over to council for discussion and direction and
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Thank you. Questions? Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm broadly supportive of the capital program. They are the right type of investment for our community for the future. If anything, I'd like us for us to complete those projects in time, and the capex spend rate is higher than usual. That would be my thought. I also hear the staff's comments over many days about the need to preserve the integrity of all our funds. Where I'm a little bit struggling, Your Worship, I just want to know a little bit better is the cost categories, right? The way I want to frame it is there's a set of activities that are and there's a set of activities that are not controllable, right? Let's say inflation, collective agreements, or moving expenses from one account to the other. Those are all ins and outs. We have no control over that. What I would like to see from these presentations, just for a better way for us to make an informed decision as a council and also for our citizens, is out of the controllable portion, how well have we done compared to our baseline? And I'll take snow removal as an example, because that's the one that is easy for us all to understand. When I see the snow removal trend here, 2021 actuals were $750,000. It jumped by over $250,000 in 2022. And I realize, there's a bunch of inflationary factors at play there. But really want to know, like, if that $250,000 was all inflation, how much was it wages? Some kind of a waterfall for us to understand. And I understand from Director Hosler too, the other day saying that, some of the KPIs that we are looking at in terms of number of complaints have gone down, which means snow removal program is probably working better than usual, which is good. I think that is necessary, but for me, it is not sufficient. For me, how I would look as necessary and sufficient is if I have a good way to know how many kilometers I've gone, how much diesel I've burned, how many operating hours I've put into snow removal services, then we can actually see the trend between this year versus 2021 to 2020 and can make an informed decision. Then we can say, well, you know what, 1048, that's $1,048,000 for this year. That's a fair estimate. But until then, it is just a chunk of dollar figures, and I don't know whether it is good, bad, or ugly. I'm not picking on you, Director Hosler, but snow removal is one example. But on all these major bucket items, if there was a better sense of, what were the cost drivers, what was controllable, what was not controllable, will just make our lives easier and easier for us to understand and explain.
Mr. Baranowski, you have your hand up.
Just some preliminary comments. That 750K in 2021, I think was significantly underrepresented, because at that time we were using staff from all over the organization to provide snow clearing services and subsidizing it with salary budget for other service areas.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind me speaking through the mayor to the councilor. Yeah, so we would have everywhere from our journeymen, who are now being funded by facilities, charging their time to, at the time, Parks and Recreation, but shoveling snow. And same thing in water, same thing in sewer, same thing with whoever we could get our hands on to try to meet that former service level. One other thing I wanted to comment on is the old staffing system before the contract was negotiated and we had some flexibility in their shifts. You were looking at roughly $12,000 a weekend plow of overtime. Now, that wasn't necessarily realized in the budget, or it would have been taken as time off, and Director Burdick would have to discuss how that flows into salaries. But at the time when I had broken it down, regular plow bringing everybody in early was roughly $4,000, and a weekend plow was roughly 12, depending on the volume of snow. So when we have a month like we had in January, we will see probably big fluctuations in the snow removal budget. And then we didn't see snow for 6 weeks. But they're out widening and doing regular stuff, but the overtime was off the table. So just some points to consider.
If I can follow up on that, and I know you're not, Counselor, you're not specifically speaking just about snow clearing, but about a broader philosophy. I'll touch on two items quickly specific to snow, and then if I can comment on that philosophy. We also have West Fernie now that's come in, and that we are funding, so we phased out Ministry of Transportation providing the snow clearing for that component of the community, and added 2 operators to the service area in the last year. Those are the major drivers for that cost change. Accurate reporting on those finances for the first time in quite a while is one of the reasons why you see it. However, your comments specifically on how many kilometers or meters of road are we plowing with what equipment at a 5-centimeter plow, and then how many of those do we have in a year, because it is non-controllable how much it snows, but we can understand our response based on the number of full plows and is absolutely the kind of data that we want to try and bring to you. It's just not where we are in terms of the sophistication of what we can pull together yet. And so we have that level of service project and business analysis work to do so that we can start to provide you and to provide our directors with better data to make recommendations to council as well.
Yeah, I can recall speaking to that when we talked about the snow and ice policy was those metrics for continuous improvement to ensure we understand where we were this year, so we could prepare and be better align our resources for the following years. Yeah. Sorry, Councilor Adams, you have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up, Your Worship. Again, it's philosophically for me, it's almost like an organizational weakness. I'm not saying that in a very negative term. It's just there is a amount of understanding that we need to do for the staff to understand the drivers of all these costs, right? So my question then is, should the taxpayers take the burden on that organizational weakness, right? And if it's 6.1% and if I arbitrarily say, no, we want to increase only by 3% instead of 6.7%, right? Is that the right approach?
Well, to your point,
It's almost like the taxpayers are subsidizing the organizational weakness we might have.
yeah, I'm not sure, and I appreciate you don't mean it as a negative, but the framing of it as an organizational weakness, there are, as Mr. Bornowski has indicated, as has Mr. Burdett, there are system improvements that we want to make, and continuous improvement is something all organizations should strive for. To your comment, making an arbitrary cut to taxes based on it's arbitrary, so it could be emotion or whatever, is probably never advisable insofar as the results. How would I put this, for law of unintended consequences, that there will be significant service cuts across a number of areas potentially. And we would have to determine what those are and consequent effect on the community.
Not for one moment suggesting that there is a line in the sand. What I'm saying is, how much are there controllable costs that we can save without changing the service level agreement and without doing any kind of activity that might destroy the integrity of the reserve funds? That's my question. What are the controllable portions without dropping any service level agreement? And what's the trend over the years?
Right.
I feel like that piece of information is missing.
Okay, I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that notion, any more than we've already done in terms of identifying those processes and improving systems such that we provide our directors with those metrics so they understand subtle changes to operating processes, et cetera. Mr. Borowski, can you comment?
Yeah, if I may, through to council, and we have, and I have spoken at this very publicly and very transparently many times. We were but a few years into having reliable financial information and a consistency in financial leadership and support for the directors to be able to actually understand their costs as a department, and are now entering a phase of defining our service areas and our metrics where we can then make really well-educated decisions. We simply aren't there as an organization, nor are many organizations our size, when we talk about municipalities or local governments in British Columbia or beyond. I absolutely support and am starving for much more sophisticated tools so that we can do a much better job of communicating with each other about the services we provide internally and externally, using them to diagnose where we're performing well or not, and then using those to report out to the community and the council to help you make good governance decisions. Certainly, the challenge for the directors as they in their departments bring their base budgets forward to finance for Bryn and I to start working with is that they are to be controlling those costs. And then we do go through reviews of the operating and the capital expenditure increases to try and bring those into control as much as possible. We have some that we just still have to do because it's constant or continual and ongoing. The professional development and support for people's maintaining their credentials is a really good example, where currently it's averages and estimates. However, we may be able to, over the coming year, trim that a little bit and true that up as we look at exact costs for travel, for nights in rooms, for course credentials that people need to maintain their certificates or to become credentialed in their roles. And there's just little bits of work like that that still need to be done. But I recognize certainly for you that the picture feels incomplete, and it does for us as well, but that's why we're here, is to continually try and build a more complete picture and support you in better decision making.
Councilor Hamilton, did you have a question?
I put my hand up, yes. I think my Councilor, Mr. Bornowski more or less answered the question that I had, so I'll take one moment to give a philosophical thought that I think we're losing the forest for the tree when we focus on like 6.7% increase or 3.2% increase or 20% increase, whatever that number might be. You know, as Director Bird had said, the mill rate is actually going down as $1 per $1,000 with this proposed budget. So it's in the framing, in a sense, the tax rate is going down, not going up. So yeah, I just think that we need to be cognizant of what we're talking about, and we need to be less as a body of council. We're not trying to necessarily find those specific efficiencies and more give staff the direction of what we see as acceptable service levels, policy direction, and have them do their job of making the budget work at that price point, at whatever level we set.
Councilor, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I was actually going to say something very similar along those lines. I mean, in previous terms, I've had the experience, I was going to say pleasure, but that would be the wrong word, of going through budgets that were extraordinarily detailed down to the point of how much diesel fuel was spent on a particular vehicle over the course of the winter. That did not serve policy decision-making at all, not one bit. What is serving policy decision, and while I support Councilor Ramadas, I believe that if council says, I would like to drill down on a piece of information, then we should get it. I fully support that completely. But I do think it's really important that the information that we're asking for is going towards policy making and not checking to see whether staff is being responsible in fuel usage for vehicles or making intelligent and professional choices about what types of vehicle is appropriate for doing a particular stretch of road versus another. Those things, they have vastly more experience in training and so on. And I believe at some point, council has to trust that the staff is actually making good, responsible, professional decisions with the information they have. Here at the policy level, you know, I care about the diesel fuel, but more about using less of it, not about how much is used on a particular plow. Over the long term, it'd be great to see fossil fuel usage go down. But you know, that again, that's the policy level decision, not the how much fuel is being used on a snowplow. So again, I support the ask for the information, but I don't know that drilling down to a line by line itemized detail of a cost for a particular item helps at the decision making level, at the policy level. as Councilor Hamilton said, you know, what are the service levels? What are the strategic goals of council as a body that we're trying to achieve? And let's make sure that we're providing sufficient direction and the funding appropriate to do that, to give staff the ability to accomplish those things. So, but again, I apologize for putting the second coat of paint on Councilor Hamilton's philosophy there, but I do think it's important to deliberate from the right seat.
Thank you. Councilor Mixon?
Here comes another can of paint. Thank you. Yeah, I think in 2018, when, you know, I've been sitting here in that chair, maybe it's a different chair, but for 5 years, and when we first came in, just to use the film removal as an example, we didn't have any data whatsoever. So our canvas was completely blank going forward. And slowly, as time went on, we acquired new people, we got more data. Linda Tynan came in, Director Burditt's here. I just feel like we're getting there, and it's the patience that we need to see this through by, you know, cutting back to 5% or whatever, and telling staff to go, oh, we want to have 5% instead of a 6.8 or an 8%. We're going to be stepping back many steps. So I think our service levels are good right now, and I think that we should continue on. The big thing that I see is a huge Achilles tendon is our mine sharing tax. And if that was to go away in 2032, especially with the $189,000 increase this year, and who knows what it's going to be next year, if it goes away, then is that going to be a 50% increase to taxes to the city of Fernie, to our ratepayers? How are we going to deal with that? So in the long term, I would like to see a stabilization reserve fund that could potentially capture that money and see it out if the fund is starting to dislocate. If the Elk Valley mine sharing tax is snapped up by the next provincial government, whatever.
Thank you.
So those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilor Ryan.
Thanks, Your Worship. It's becoming a trend where, you know, certain things that I say becomes what I've been asking almost. Continuous improvement is definitely a policy question, Your Worship. When I said, are we improving? It's a continuous improvement lens that we're taking to this. When I'm asking, you know, kilometers plowed or diesel burned, what I meant to say is, in this year, did we do better than before? It could be any other metrics. I just use that as an example. But getting to that level of detail where are our set of business activities getting better over the years? It's absolutely a policy question. It's absolutely a strategic question, and we should be asking these questions. Just want to make that clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I 100% agree. It's just that we have to define what's better. Right, like if we're gonna ask the question, are we improving every year, then we have to decide what the metric is. So if the metric is gallons of diesel fuel, which is a terrible metric, by the way, but then yes, if that's our metric, if that's what we decide, then absolutely we should expect staff to deliver that to us. If the metric is number of service requests that have changed, that have gone up or down, then that's a good metric too, and then let's be able to ask for that. But I agree with Councilor Ramadas. Yes, it's a policy decision to decide the metric, but like not just ask for them scattershot. We need to deliver that and say, we're going to ask for this as a metric year in, year out, so that information can be provided to us when we want it.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if it falls to us to provide the metrics or define the metrics so much as to create a policy that focuses on continuous improvement, and our directors and our CEO provide us the metrics and they report on those metrics annually so that we can see and they can provide us the detail that shows continuous improvement, whether it's diesel burned or 4 kilometers plowed or the I'm not sure we necessarily as a council have to define the metric. What we need to understand is that we are setting, whether it's a policy of continuous improvement and that staff is reporting on metrics they've defined that show and we've accepted as continuous improvement. Mr. Barnowski. Councilor Shoesmith and then Councilor Hamilton.
Well, I feel the 6.8 number is certainly an unhappy one. I do feel staff has done their best to get us to this point, and asking them to do better is, well, I mean, already done what you can with this here. I feel this is in large measure a holdover from the history of this institution, and then a lot of these things are what they are. They're immovable unless we take really drastic, probably unwise steps. I feel that it behooves us as a council that moving forward, we keep this unhappy 6.8 in mind, and going forward, we're going to have the same discussion another 3 times at least for those of us in this room. We should be doing everything we can at every other meeting to keep in mind how we can get that down or how we can improve the funding gap for our infrastructure. At the moment, however, I do feel staff has definitely done their best to put us in good stead.
Yeah, I appreciate that observation, Councilor Shoesmith, and even in the operating summary that we received, it does highlight opportunities for fee review, for example, to increase our revenue. So there is already a lens on that, but Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. 2 comments that actually segue perfectly to your comment about who should be setting the metrics. Really, it's the community. They're the ones who should be determining what the acceptable service levels are and what their expectations are. And then it's on us to develop the policy to deliver that, which segues to comment towards Councilor Shoesmith's comment of, I agree 100% about, asking staff to do better, but what does that mean? This is a number based on the service level that this community expects, and this is what it costs. So yes, we might be able to find some more efficiencies here and there, but there's professionals, that's their job. I said it before, like focusing on this 6.8% number, I think is a red herring. We need to be having the discussion right now of, do we want to be continuing with the service levels we have, and what are we as a council wanting to do to future-proof this organization? Are we wanting to set aside another $80,000 for an affordable housing fund? Are we wanting to start asking staff, or not asking staff, sorry, but starting to put away some money as a stabilization fund, a rainy day fund, for when the mine sharing agreement potentially disappears, for the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5 major projects that have not 6-figure, not some, they're 8 or 9-figure projects potentially. Once all the services come in. So where's that money coming from? It's coming from the community regardless. And it's a matter of, do we pay it now a little bit, or do we wait 5 years, 3 years, whatever the case may be, and suddenly we've got a major tax increase? And I can speak, my philosophy is let's start chipping away at it.
No, I appreciate that perspective, and it does, and I appreciate the perspective that the community sets the metrics in terms of our service levels, which brings us full circle to an earlier conversation we had about a very thorough, robust, defensible community survey. So we understand people's, not 32 people, the greatest number of possible people's satisfaction with the services they are receiving, and where they see the potential for improvements and where they may potentially want to spend more money on this. Councilor Ryan, message you.
Oh, no, I was just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
To Councillor Hamilton's mention, is this the service level that the community expects? Do we know that? Do we actually know that? I don't know that we do. Maybe they'd be happy with a slightly lower service level for a lower tax rate. I think that we don't know that.
Yeah, which to my point is we don't have those survey results, and that's certainly in the work plan and something we're hoping to accomplish. I did want to return to something, Director Burdick, that you talked about early in the budget discussions, and we haven't talked about since, and that is the COVID recovery grant. And there's money in that grant that could be applied to reduce potentially a tax increase in 2023. And I'd like to revisit that, not least of all, because just to help people understand, you know, how that would, what that could potentially look like and what it could mean for the future, both in terms of kicking the can down the road potentially, or addressing an issue now when, you know, we've talked about the history of this institution and working to resolve these issues. And, you know, coming out of COVID and some of these service level variances becoming clear now as we get to full levels of service. You know, are we in some way, will we in some way benefit from applying some of that grant money now? And at a time of, in the wake of hyperinflation, taking the pressure off the taxpayers a little bit.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor Milligan. There's 285,000 left in that COVID recovery grant, which would, I mean, council could use any amount between 0 and that full amount if they chose to offset this year's tax increase. The full amount equates to a reduction of 3.52%. There's pros and cons, obviously. One pro would be that it provides immediate taxpayer relief in this year, in this period of inflation. I would say there's more cons to it. One being, if you were to use it all this year, you're immediately starting off 2024 at a 3.52% deficit that you have to make up. There's opportunities for us to work on our cost savings, you know, like we are working on our getting better, continuous improvement. So I'm optimistic that way, but it's also really risky because inflation is still high. I mean, it's not as high as it was a few months ago, but it's not low by any stretch. And I feel like it's very realistic that we could still very much feel the effects of that this year. And then I also reached out to a few other local CFOs about doing this, and they all recommended against it for that reason, just kind of kicking the can down the road, but also that these funds could be used to do something else, which, while we don't have any immediate plans for that right now, they would still be there if we didn't use it. So my personal recommendation is not to use it, maybe because I'm a little less risk averse than the average person, but I do feel using it would be risky because I don't know that any cost savings would erase that initial deficit. And then anyway, those are my thoughts on it.
Thank you.
Following up on the topic of risk aversion, can staff walk us through what the implication to taxes would be if property values go down? We've been operating under the assumption that our assessments just go up, but you know, interest rates are up, property values everywhere are starting to drop. What happens if next year, you know, we see a 10, 15, 20% drop in property values?
Well, and sorry to come to it. And you just have to look at the graph that BC assessment provided in terms of the date of the valuation and their set values have consistently gone down the center.
Precisely.
Yeah, so I think it's very likely that we will see it go down with next year's assessments, in which case, you know, city council and city staff set the revenue that we need to provide these services. And we would adjust the mill rate accordingly in order to collect that much revenue. So, you know, if next year we need a tax increase of 5%, but assessment values have gone down 10%, then the mill rate is going to go up. And I don't know if I actually, yeah, this might not be the best time to share this, but I saw this article from my hometown in St. John, New Brunswick, where it's same situation as ours, assessment values went way up. City council approved the tax increase, which meant the mill rate go down, and that's how they said it in the newspaper, that there was a tax decrease because the tax rate went down. But in actuality, people were paying more tax, so we don't do that in BC, we tell it like it is, but I thought that was.
And sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to say that with regards to the COVID funding, that as we have already seen over the last few months, there are unexpected surprises in the budget, and it would be awfully nice having that cushion. I'm not thrilled at the idea of kicking the cost increase further down the road. I don't see that there's good value, but I do see good value in having that buffer there for unexpected costs and so on, that not causing us to go back and hit the reserves again, which are already suffering and so on. So that's one thing to do. Secondary reserve for us.
Yeah, and then just to be clear, I raise it as we need to go into this with our eyes wide open.
100%.
That conversation to make sure that our community understands these decisions as well.
100%.
Just a quick question, based on the comments about mill rate, what would our taxes look like if we maintain the 3.35 mill rate?
I'll get that to you for you very shortly.
Thank you. And sorry, follow up, what did you say the current mill rate would be?
2.991.
Okay, thank you.
Which is, it's probably some rounding that goes on in there, that's not to the decimal point. So don't quote me on that when you get here.
It dropped by 10 percentage points. It will drop down by 10 percentage points.
So did you say 2.99 was rounded?
Well, even in financial software, when coding gets to 17 decimal places.
That's right.
Thanks, Worship. Just one more follow-up question with the user charges too. Is it good practice to actually say, well, we are working on these, on increasing the user charges or user fees and putting into the budget before we actually do it?
No.
Okay.
So
just trying to understand like what might be the impact once we work through that this year.
If I may, your worship through the council may tell us to freeze user fees. Council may tell us to bring them up and down, so we budget based on what our fees are now and what we believe the volume will be, rather than what we believe our future fees may be, if we can get it through a horseshoe, the council horseshoe. Philosophically, does that help provide some color?
It did.
Okay.
And sorry, most of them, we already have like a 2% increase built into the bylaw. So that's in the budget, but any future updates that we're planning on bringing forward later this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, I took particular note of in the operating revenue and expenditure report that they're, and I quote, current rates may not accurately reflect the cost to the municipality, particularly of building and development fees as they've been outlined. And so there may be an opportunity, for example, to improve our revenue on those streams. But that is again, not a switch we throw, it's a process we enter into and we'll go into. Any other questions, comments, observations?
I just, thank you. So the COVID funds could go into the financial stabilization reserve fund as well, that they be put into there for future.
That's right. No, they have their own restrictions. Well, those restrictions are pretty wide open. They're basically like their own reserve, so you could use them for basically anything that you want, but not
To transfer
to reserve this.
And sorry, Mr. Burdick, do they expire? Is there, are they stale dated at some point?
No.
No.
There, if I can to council, there is also the announced, but absent of any detail, capital grant fund that we anticipate coming. We don't know how much. We don't know the restrictions. We don't know the guidance. We don't know the reporting requirements. So it is also not yet reflected in the budget, but you will have to receive a budget amendment once we receive that info, because that, I mean, it may or may not be sizable. We really have no detail.
To answer Councilor Hamilton's question, if we left the mill rate at the same, it would bring in just over another $1 million in revenue. But in order to do that, you would have to have a plan for that $1 million. You can't just intentionally budget for a surplus. So.
Councilman Cutter, thank you.
That's a nice segue into my question. Which is. What? So we have to have a balanced budget. How does the mine tax sharing program influence that? In other words, what I mean by that is if we're gonna get, forget what it was, 3.4 million or whatever. Is that basically the same as all the other income that we get in the same bucket, and it has to be balanced with all the expenses on the other side? It's not treated separately?
Correct.
And where I'm getting at with this is, and this goes back to what Councilor Nixon was talking about earlier, you know, if we had, you know, when the mine tax sharing started in, that was 2007 or 2008, at around, I think it started around 2.5 million. If we had been taking $500,000 a year every year and putting it in that bucket, we'd have 12 or 13 million dollars, and we'd be pulling in $500,000 or $600,000 a year just in earnings off that now. By the time the mine tax sharing program went away, we wouldn't need it anymore. You know, but do we have? Is there a financial framework within the city that would allow us to do that? If we're keeping the money, if we're trying to build up our own financial instrument in order to do something, does that exist? Could we do that?
Yes, that could be a part of council's direction as part of the budget process to put a portion of that money away in its own reserve to be saved for whatever purpose council desires. You know, let's pretend that did happen in 2008. Who knows what a council in 2015 might have done with that money? You know, it's the same as if you somehow got your hands on a bunch of Bitcoin when it was at $1. You know, when would you have actually sold it? Would you have held it till now?
$110.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that we didn't do that, and who knows what the discussion was. I actually tried to find the discussion 15 years ago, but I wasn't able to. And maybe at that time, it just happened to be a large tax increase year, and then it was decided to use to offset it, and then it just kept building from there. But
just to be clear, the Elk Valley property tax sharing agreement predates 2008. It was renegotiated.
That's accurate.
So going to municipalities for a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
In varying sizes, that hence the renegotiation. Yeah.
Right. If I just please follow up your worship, there's a statement is, you know, I think we spend a goodly amount of time around the table and staff time on the discussion of the, you know, the cost of the community and the service and so on this year, and even some outlook to 5, but we rarely take a few moments to go, what if we looked 25 years down the road? And I think it's worth every once in a while taking a step back, and if we, you know, there is always the risk that one day that money will deteriorate, it will go down, or potentially even go away. And planning for that day and using some of that opportunity right now to plan for that, I think would be us. Not that we need to do that here tonight, but I definitely think it's worth a discussion.
I think that's a fair point.
Your worship, to Councilor McIsaac's point, I just feel like, you know, what this whole process is telling me at least is that there is a tax base issue here. I think we should look closely at, you know, how we can expand tax bases in the going years. And I'm really excited for the workshop that we had yesterday. That's a step in the right direction. Yeah, hopefully in coming years, we won't be so nitty-gritty about costs, and we might actually have a tax base that can support all the service level that we provide right now. I do have a couple of very nitty-gritty questions here, Your Worship, if you don't mind asking. I looked at the community park ground maintenance, we kept it at around $15,000 for this year. If for any reason, some of our asset disposal or anything goes through this year, will there be a reduction in expenses there?
If Mr. Burdick, our Director of Parks and Facilities and Recreation isn't available, but I'll try to answer that once I can see the line we're speaking of with Mr. Burdick.
I don't have a GL number there, but I was just wondering like what the impact might be if we have.
Is that our operating budget for Parks and Facilities maintenance you need?
That's correct, community park ground maintenance, it says, we have over $15,000 here, but when I looked at previous years, there were smaller numbers.
Do you have the page number from your budget?
I have markets of that, but I lost that copy. I'm sorry about that. That was one thing, and another nitty-gritty question here is, in terms of RCMP policing contract too, like, is that set in stone? Can we actually reduce the percentage for this year? Is there any leeway at all, or is that like conservatism built into that number there?
The RCMP budget I can comment on. We are, as part of our municipal policing agreement, committed to the number of full-time employees that we have, and we know that we have a full complement at the moment. It may come down if some of them are on long-term leave. After a certain amount of leave time, the city stops paying for the municipal members' leave and it transfers off of our books. And so we may see some, what a colleague would call slippage or some savings if our members are on leave and they're not backfilled with another member, either from our provincial complement now doing municipal work or a recruit. But we have been given notice that we are at full complement and in fact are even +1 in the region, meaning it's advisable to budget in anticipation of having a complete complement.
Okay, thank you, Worship. I wonder if Mr. Bornowski could tell us who decides the complement?
That's a fair question.
It was negotiated as part of the first municipal policing agreement when we passed 5,000 residents. And I believe would have been endorsed by council and then executed by the mayor of the time as the quote unquote chief executive officer related to the service. I have been through renegotiations of increased complements as population increases, but I have not been through the execution of a brand new MPUA, so so I can't speak in detail.
Just as a follow-up, Your Worship. I presume, although I don't know, but I presume that the RCP probably has a schedule for a jurisdictional area, number of people, size of coverage and so on, and they pick the number of the book as opposed to somebody going, I think I can get you 7. No, I'm pretty sure we could get away with 6. Negotiation is a loose term, but I presume that there's some sort of schedule that's provided with a number. That's fine. Have we ever seen that?
I have not seen one here. Okay. I have seen recommended staffing levels per 10,000 people or per 100,000 people or per population, plus your demographic or your economic and social information of your community. But I would like to hope that you would have a very sophisticated.
I would presume, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I wonder if that's not to create work for anybody, if that's not something we could have a conversation at the council table about a bit of an education on that, what that actually looks like.
I mean, if your worship, if I can, I would take that note as we continue to work with our officer in charge and their supports on what report regular reporting.
Excellent. Yeah, and to be clear, I think too, that the province pays 30% of the cost of our RCMP coverage, and we pay 70%.
I was just gonna make a comment that it sounds like a perfect thing to have the officer in charge or staff sergeant come back in the next update.
Tell us how it works.
Yeah, perfect. And we had that conversation with them this week.
As for the community parks question, you're asking why it was a decrease?
Well, what I would say, sorry,
Yeah.
what I meant was, if there was any asset disposal that might happen through the year, would that cost go down?
Yes, I don't know if it would be that specific line, but obviously there'd be less chemicals required for maintaining, any, grounds on any lot that is disposed of.
And basic brushing and weeding and mowing.
Yeah, that specific line, there was a pretty sizable budget reduction this year because, and I will confirm the history of this with, Mr. Logan and bring it back on the 14th. But I believe in 2019, 2020, that was when we were doing the Max Turk, yeah, and so the costs were quite high in that line item for those 2 years. And then the budget was accordingly high, and then this year was identified as a cost reduction because we're not doing that anymore, so, yeah.
Another follow-up question.
Please.
Just in terms of strategic planning too, there's a budget of about $18,500. Just wondering like how important is that session, and could staff take on that responsibility instead of using the consultant?
Well, my initial reaction to that from my seat is no. We had that presentation from the gentleman, and I appreciate the fact that it's outside the organization and provides us with a sort of a clinical view of ourselves as experienced and new counselors. And my preference would be to use an outside facilitator and not further burden staff with something we have otherwise budgeted.
To kind of support your comment, I think it behooves us to have an outside voice facilitating that so that there is no influence, overlap, whatever between staff and the political body. We have a third party, not arbitrary, I'm yapping on the word that I'm looking for, but objective, thank you, yes.
Subjective.
An objective voice guiding and facilitating that.
Yeah, and that's my feeling as well, that we want on both sides, we want, and I think staff would agree, we want a cold eyes look at our process and ensure that we together sort of come at this to develop our own philosophy.
If I may, during many points in your term, staff are going to provide you with recommendations that you disagree with. And it's your job as the elected officials to do the heavy lifting and make the hard decision. Because we don't put on that political lens, we don't put on the perspective that we are the elected representative to the community. And if we facilitate and lead the strategic planning, at the first time there's a recommendation that you significantly disagree with as an entire body, it erodes trust in that strategic plan, because the questions start to emerge around is staff driving this. And I've seen it enough that I couldn't recommend having staff do any governing body's own strategic planning. My recommendation is always you bring someone in from the outside to protect the governing body and to protect the employees from questioning who's driving the bus.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was sort of more cynical than I would have framed it, but I think it works. And I think it's true. And we don't want those questions, right? We want it to be clear, that we set that direction ourselves.
And if I can, I also very much want to protect staff from over functioning in your domain, which we passionate people contend to do.
Councillor Kelly and then Councillor Randa.
Can I just ask, Director, through your worship, can you reiterate if the mill rate is 2.99 and the tax increase was to be 6.82, what that would mean to the average family in dollars, please?
Yes, 10 seconds. For the average home, that would amount to an increase in their annual tax bill of $138.29. Just on the city portion alone, can't control what we're charged for school and hospital and MFA and BC assessment, which are also important parts of their tax bill.
Your worship, my thought on that strategic planning was more around, maybe I asked this question in our previous meeting as well. It's more around a set of documentation, set of policy framework that we have done in the past, right? I mean, there's been previous councils that have done it in the past. Is there opportunity for us to just look at those artifacts and make them better instead of starting all over again? Like, why are we doing it is my question. More, if we have documents now, like I've seen many reports come out of consulting groups back in 2018, 2019, several workshops. Those artifacts exist already. Why again?
Go ahead, Councilman.
If you don't mind, your worship, to respond a little to a portion of what I think Councilor Amalas is asking, we don't, in the past, going through strategic reviews, it's not a ground zero start. There always is the reference material from the current existing strategic plan and so on. That's part of the package that gets started with. So there's a review, because what may happen is it's likely that a portion of the previous strategic plan will remain more or less untouched because it's still consistent, but other things will change. For example, going back 4 years ago to strategic planning, economic development was still being rated much higher than housing affordability as far as what the concerns were in the community. And those two things have changed in their stature and in their concern within the community. And as a consequence, it may be that we want to elevate or lower the prioritization of some things in there, but it's not a blank white piece of paper. Traditionally, we've started with the current existing strategic plan with a review of that and then a discussion, and then go outside of that. And there are the things that are not currently captured within that strategic plan that should be brought in. Is there prioritization changes? So it's usually not a blank piece of paper, which, by the way, doesn't mean that this council couldn't decide they want to do that. But historically, there's usually a review and incremental change.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that perspective, but I think, and council can correct me if I'm wrong in this. I think collectively, I would like us to put our own philosophical stamp based on the fact that our beliefs and why we believe we're here to represent the community on the direction this community will take for at least the next 4 years.
100%.
Bearing in mind that, as Councilman McIsaac said, taking that long view, setting it on a trajectory for 25 and 50 years. But I don't want to take somebody else's document in its entirety, do that. I want us to bring our own perspective and ensure that we're aligned. And so when those difficult decisions come to this table, we have a document that we can very clearly base those decisions on. I'm sorry. Seeing movement where there was none.
I did, but I'll throw my hand up anyways.
To make me feel better.
Yeah, sure. To kind of bring the conversation back to the topic at hand of the options that are before us in the staff report. I would like to propose that we put the tax rate at 8% with the monies over and above what the current budget is into that affordable housing reserve that was started last year. So we have continued to increase it so that there are monies available should future projects come before us, and we have the capital available to act on immediately.
That a motion?
Well, it's just discussion. Sure, I'll make it as a motion.
Would anyone care to second that motion?
I'll second that.
Discussion. I appreciate the intent, personally, but I do, affordable housing being a key priority for the community. But on top of the already existing 6.82% increase, I'm not comfortable insofar as, well, for many of us, 138 $2.29 may not seem like a big increase for the average household. There are people in our community who struggle every day with incomes and otherwise. And many of them I recognize are struggling with housing themselves. I wouldn't want to necessarily increase their burden.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm gonna just say I'm a bit torn on this because I support the intent greatly. The need for affordable housing is dire. The need for council to intervene in that is desperate. It was quite shocking to me yesterday in the meeting with the developers and builders and so on to hear even the desperation in their voice with regards to the inability to address affordable housing, even at their own staff level. You know, that really shook me. Having said that, I'll speak against an arbitrary change to the number, whether that's up or down. I think staff have done an excellent job in communicating to us what numbers are needed to support the service levels, what numbers are needed to support the capital changes that we need to do. We have a detailed breakdown of the goals of the city and what it costs to do that. Deciding arbitrarily to move that number up and down means if we're going to do that, then I want a robust discussion about what's being added to or taken away of the council side from what's been delivered. And not something specific. Now, having said that, I might be a little bit more supportive if I didn't know we had with the COVID money, we may be able to leverage that and take advantage of. But yeah, I'm not going to support an increase, just like I wouldn't support an arbitrary decrease, at least not without a really solid understanding what the effective change that was essentially.
Thank you. Mr. McCall.
Your worship, if I may, there was some, the train went by when you said your number. So, in order to ensure that, the public knows the motion we're discussing, I'd like to be able to take the opportunity to read out the motion, but as I understand, Councilor Hamilton presented, which would be that staff be directed to prepare a draft 2023 general fund operating budget to include a property taxation revenue increase of 8%. And yeah, so that's my understanding of the motion, right? Thank you.
Any other discussion, Councilor?
I agree 100% with both of the comments. Philosophically, morally, I do struggle knowing how much cost of living has gone up in this town, especially in the last year. You know, it's as a young family, it's at the end of the month it can be tight sometimes. But to Councilor McIsaac's earlier comment about having the political fortitude to look 25, 30, 40 years down the road. I've got a young daughter. I want this to be a community that she can grow up in and live in. If we're constantly afraid of increasing taxes because of the cost today, what is that cost going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now? We're in this situation with underfunded reserves because of a historical fear of increasing taxes and focusing on today and tomorrow, not looking farther into the future. So yes, I can empathize with a concern and a fear for raising taxes, but taxes are what pay for everything now and tomorrow.
Understood. Councilor Shetty.
Thank you. It strikes me that we're to some extent putting the cart before the horse here a little bit, attempting to do with a budget what we should actually be attempting to do with our strategic plan. As slow as this ship turns, and that's frustrating, that is actually how I think it's supposed to be operating, if I'm not mistaken there. Although to Councillor Hamilton's point, I think it might be wise for some financial prudence with the future in mind. I accept, if not enjoy, taxes If I see that, succinctly put, yeah. If I see that they're well spent on either providing the infrastructure that we are running a deficit on or lowering costs in the future.
Thank you. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councilor Smith stole my words literally, like, all I was trying to say was, again, like, increasing the tax base is probably the way to go, and it's a strategic planning question, and we may be confusing that with the tax rate question on hand here.
Yeah, and there are, thank you, and there are other mechanisms, you know, we have recently, as a council, and the previous council developed our, now, I will butcher the name, but our property acquisition and disposition policy.
Municipal lands acquisition disposition policy.
Thank you. That provides us with other tools to fund that reserve. And so my immediate reaction is, let's work with those other tools before we place the burden on the taxpayer. So I'll call the vote. We have the motion. Could I ask you to read the motion again, Mr. McConnell?
Certainly. That staff be directed to prepare a draft 2023 general fund operating budget to include a property taxation revenue increase of 8%.
All in favor? And those opposed? Thank you. And thank you for raising it. It was a good discussion. I appreciate that, Councilor.
And if I can confirm, Your Worship, I believe there's only one in favor, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the loser count that as opposed to. Councilor Hamilton is in favor, all others were opposed.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. To that point, the recommended number, I guess it's not a number you recommend, is it? I'm sorry, is that, how do I frame it?
Yeah, that staff recommendation is 6.82%.
Okay. Councilor McCaskill is moving.
6.82%.
I'll ask Mr. McConnell to read the.
Certainly. That staff be directed to prepare a draft 2023 general fund operating budget to include a property taxation revenue increase of 6.83%.
Any further discussion?
Oh, do you want to?
Oh, I'm sorry. Moved by Councilor McCaskill.
I'll move that.
Seconded by Councilor Nixon. Any further discussion? All in favor? You get everybody?
Okay, so 5.
Opposed?
Thank you. And so in opposition is Councilors Ramirez and Councilors Adia Kelly.
Correct. And then I'll ask for a mover and a seconder on the following recommendation. That staff present the budget for public comment and prepare the draft budget and financial plan for consideration by council for March 14th, 2023. Moved by Councilor Ramirez, seconded by Councilor Hamilton. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. And thank you everyone for the robust discussion. It was very helpful. These are not easy conversations, and I recognize that. We are in the public eye, and as a result, we have a significant responsibility. So thank you for your comments. Moving on. We'll probably keep this brief because I know it's been a long evening for everyone. But we'll go on to reports from council members. You're gonna start with Councilor Nixon.
Right on. We attended all of us attended the budget meeting. That was open house on February 15th. I was a little disappointed with the amount of people that had attended, but then was
happy with the attendance that we saw yesterday at the, for the developers and the landowners and stuff like that. That was really good. McElhaney said yesterday. In future, I was thinking that maybe a budget 101, I think maybe people are intimidated, they don't have the right questions to ask. You know, just in prior to having a budget, I know that a few people had said that to me, they said, I trust you, we elected you guys go and do what you're gonna do, right? So, what else do I have to say? We had a great family day, we got to be unofficial again last weekend for BC Freestyle, and I'm looking forward to the Grizz Days with my kids right here this weekend. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor Karen.
Echo a few of the things that Councilor Nixon said. Congrats to the Ghost Riders proceeding to the next round of the playoffs. I'm hoping that I can actually take in a game. And I hope you'll see some of us out and about at Grizz Days. I will be selling Grizz pens, so anyone that needs one, come see me. Yeah, that's all for now.
Thank you, Councilor Kelly. Councilor
Thank you, Richard. I do just want to comment on the great budget open house that staff put on. I think that was wonderful. I had made a comment then, and I would hope we can follow up at this at some point that I hope our budget engagement doesn't end at the open house. I would love for us to be able to take the information that was brought out that night and have it available to the public at other points throughout the year. And I know we discussed on that night, so I hope that doesn't get dropped. I too was really happy with the developers and builders engagement that we had. That was eye-opening and educational. So that was wonderful to see, and I hope that keeps going. And I wanted to comment a little bit too on what Councilor Nixon just said about the public and the budget, which I think is very easy to focus specifically on the number. Because it's objective, it's not subjective, it's a hard number, it's easy to discuss and so on. Without the discussion that goes on around the services and facilities and long-term asset management and so on, the number doesn't really matter on it. It becomes kind of pointless. So the more public engagement and public education and so on that we can do to help people understand why the number is the end, right? It falls out of all of the other work. It's not the starting point. So I think that there's a lot of value for that. And then on something later note, I will be flipping pancakes on Saturday morning. Grizz, I cannot promise a slow-mo pork. Could happen, it could happen, but yeah, if you're out and about for pancakes, thank you.
Councilor Adams.
Yeah, I could parrot what's been said about the budget meeting and the developers meeting. You know, for me, the best part of both of those was the in public engaging with members of the community. Our last council, we didn't really have that opportunity for 3 out of the 4 years. So to be back doing that was great. And I hope that we continue to see robust engagement in future opportunities, open houses and such. And other than that, I'm looking forward to Grizz Days and Grizz Days being back to quote unquote normal.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Schuster.
Thank you, Councilor. Actually, me too. Yeah, similar things to the other fellas here. I would like to say that my big takeaway is that people aren't very concerned about the budget. That or they just find that boring and it. But they are concerned and involved with the permitting and planning process. And being from that sort of milieu myself, I can say that that community is very happy to be engaged about this. They're really excited. So that's all about all Councilor Schuster has to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I would pretty much be repeating what everyone else has said. I know I said at the outset and thanked Mr. Simone for that workshop yesterday and the attendees as well. Like they were frank and candid and professional, and I really appreciated the interchange. And I think it sets us up well in terms of this is how we collectively make processes better, which I really appreciated. Grizz Day is of course this weekend. I had Grizz and I had a big tete-a-tete in this room today. I don't know if you saw those pictures on social media. That was a lot of fun. And a bit of a plug for the senior center's lunch that my wife and I enjoyed this week. Would encourage everyone to go over if they're in town and they have the opportunity. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the kitchen is open. James, the chef, is working for them and he does a great job. And the service was excellent and the company was lovely. I know Councillor Kelly wanted me to give a rundown on the RDK, and maybe I'll save that for our next council meeting, if you don't mind.
Sounds good.
But that's also a very busy time and also deep in budgets, and the RDK budget is out now for public consultation. So if folks are interested, they should go and check out the RDK website and look at that one as well. So thank you, everybody. We have nothing in camera, so I will conclude the business and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our meeting hosts.
You see, you're.